What do you really need in an electric scooter? In this video, we're going to take a look at what your money gets you. The electric scooter market has a fairly defined price range. To be clear, in this video we're talking about commuter electric scooters. We're not talking about the ones that are sort of like mini motorcycles. We're talking about the kind of electric scooters that mimic the function of a bicycle. Most commuter scooters fall in the $400 to $600 price range. You see a little variation with the builds and kind of trade-offs with range, stats, and that kind of stuff, but for the most part, pretty similar scooters. Now looking at the extremes, on the lower end you can get a budget scooter for around $300, and on the high end, the most expensive commuter scooters will run you around $1,000. In this video, we're taking a look at those two ends. Our budget scooter is going to be represented by the GoTrax XR Elite, and our high-end premium scooter is going to be represented by the Unagi Model 1. With these two scooters, we're going to take a look at the features, compare them, and try to get at what really matters and how much you really need to spend for a scooter. We're going to start off by looking at the physical features of each scooter, and for each part we're going to look at our budget scooter, then compare it to the more expensive scooter. So starting off with the handlebars, on the budget scooter we can see we have a perfectly acceptable design. We've got nice grips with nice traction, and we also have a traditional mechanical brake. Now going to our more expensive scooter, we see that the grips have a little bit of a nicer material, and instead of a mechanical brake we have an electrical brake. This seems like a minor change, but it is significant because the electric brake can slow the scooter down in a more gentle manner. So this helps extend the lifetime of the scooter. Going back to our budget scooter and now looking at the display, again we see a perfectly acceptable design. It's simple and shows you just what you need. Switching back to the more expensive scooter, we can see the display shows a little bit more. You can see what gear you're in, and you can see how many motors you're using. Overall, with the expensive scooter, everything looks a little bit nicer, it's a little more premium, and you have a few more features that you can customize. Moving down the tiller of our scooters, we now get to the folding. We see that our budget scooter has a little clunky of a folding. It has multiple touch points, which isn't too bad, but it overall hurts the portability. Going back to our more expensive scooter, we see that we have one-touch folding. Elements like this make the scooter easier to use and easier to take around. Now moving over to the deck, we can see that our low-end scooter actually has a very nice deck. It's got some nice texturing and it's very wide. Switching over to our more expensive scooter, we see that surprisingly it has a smaller deck. It's more narrow, has less room, but it does have nice texturing and a better quality material to grip your feet as you ride. So here with the deck, we're starting to see that you don't have to spend a ton of money and that budget scooters can provide good or sometimes even better features. Our last stop when looking at the physical features of the scooter are the wheels. And these wheels are kind of just different. It's not really fair to do an outright comparison, so I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of each. Starting with our budget scooter, we get 8.5-inch pneumatic tires. Pneumatic meaning air-filled. These air-filled tires have the benefit of providing some suspension. That means when you hit some cracks or bumps, it kind of eases the force a little bit so you don't get jolted as much. So you overall get a smoother ride. Switching over to our higher-end scooter, we see that it has 7.5-inch solid tires. Solid tires also have some air pockets, which I'll talk about right now. So the solid tires help prevent any popping or piercing, giving you the peace of mind and lower maintenance with the scooter. The air pockets in the tires help provide some suspension, but still not as good as the air-filled tires. So the solid tires, you'll feel some bumping and some shaking in the road, but they do provide that peace of mind. So with air-filled tires and solid tires, this really comes down to preference and where you'll ride. If you're riding on smooth trails and roads, for the most part, it's kind of a similar experience. If you then move on to sidewalks that kind of have those concrete slabs and some seams, for the most part, it's still similar. On the solid tire scooter, you might feel some little bit of bumping and kind of shaking as you hit those seams. But then when you get to rougher roads and maybe brick paths, that kind of stuff, the solid tire, you're going to notice a ton of bumping, a ton of shaking, and sometimes even vibrating. So for those rough roads, an air-filled tire will be best, but if you're not riding over the worst kind of terrain, solid tires will do just fine. So we've covered all of the apparent physical features of each scooter, but we've barely really hit on what really matters with the scooter. What's truly important about an electric scooter is the ride and fundamental stats. How powerful is the motor? How fast does the scooter go? What kind of range does it have? How does the ride feel? Any glaring safety issues or structural flaws aside, These are the most important parts of an electric scooter. So let's go through each. The motor of your scooter is going to determine how fast you can go and your hill climbing ability. Do you want to feel the rush of quick acceleration, or do you ride in a hilly area? Then a stronger motor is going to be right for you. Speed is also impacted by the motor, but a lot of times the speed limit is set by the manufacturer. Speeds on commuter scooters tend to range from 15 miles per hour up to 20 miles per hour. Starting with 15 is around the speed of a bike and it's plenty fast. Moving up to 20 miles per hour, you'll feel a lot faster on the scooter and you'll kind of feel more at home in the streets and the roads when you're riding with cars. 5 miles per hour doesn't sound like a huge difference, but on the scooter, 15 to 20, that's a 33% increase. And when you're on the scooter, you're not protected by a car, you're not inside anything, you're out with the elements, you feel the increase in speed. Going to range is pretty self-explanatory. How far do you need to go? Quick note here, range is often one of the biggest deciders of price. So if you want to save some money, you should be honest with yourself of how far do I really need to go. The final consideration that really matters for a scooter, and probably the most important one, is how does the ride feel? And this actually is impacted by the physical build of the scooter. It usually comes down to the type of wheel, the wheel size, and the lack of or inclusion of a suspension. If you have big air-filled tires with a suspension, your rides are going to be a lot smoother. If you have small, solid tires with no suspension, they're going to be a little bumpier and shakier. Quick word of advice with this is not to rule out solid tires. For most people, you're riding on pretty smooth trails, sidewalks, or roads, so a solid tire will do you just fine. If you are in those rougher terrains though, you should opt for a pneumatic tire or a scooter that has some suspension. Going back to our two scooters, the GoTrex XR Elite as our budget option and the Unagi Model 1 as our more expensive option, we can see that they're not all that different. There are some differences with build, stats, some trade-offs, but we can see for the most part that the budget scooter holds in there. The real point of this video was just to say you don't have to spend a ton of money to get a good commuter scooter that'll serve you well. It's nice to have a scooter that has, a flashy build, customizability, and huge stats. But if you're realistic about what stats do I need, and you keep in mind of what's really important, you can save a lot of money and get a scooter that's perfect for you.